Alright, so I'm outside on February 24th, early in the morning. Thermometer showing temperature of 14 degrees, humidity 16%. And I'm just out here to test a wilderness survival product and, well, to use some backup camping gear if that doesn't work. In wilderness survival terms, mainly for a go bag, a bug out bag, I'd be using a Mylar sleeping bag and a Mylar tent for a bug out bag, or 72-hour kit for evacuation purposes. So that's what would be used for any type of evacuation. Whether it's in an urban setting or whether it becomes something you would use in the wilderness. This is the Mylar sleeping bag. Weighs just a few ounces. It's called Tact Bivvy by Survival Frog. And as you can see, it has like a plastic texture to it, even though it's called a Mylar sleeping bag. So that is the item you would use for a 72-hour kit or bug out bag. I don't have the Mylar tent with me right now, but that would be the other item that would be used for something like that. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using a few luxury items, since it is 14 degrees outside and I want to make it as reasonable as possible rather than torturing myself. So I'm going to be using a tent, and this is the tent, as you can see. Nice Swiss gear tent. Does job good. And then the second luxury item I'm going to be using for backup is this 0 degree sleeping bag that has a weight of 7.4 pounds, and it does go down to 0 degrees. And then the third and fourth luxury items that I'll be using are this blow-up mattress. It's also by Klymit, and it weighs a little over a pound. 72 inches long, 23 inches wide. That's what it looks like in the package, and that is what it looks like when it's all spread out. And it works really well, actually. I've used it before and have slept on it, and it has worked out perfectly. It is very comfortable, yet at the same time it's very portable. I think it took me like about 25 breaths to blow it up, which makes it incredibly transportable, because it only weighs a pound and you can blow it up in 25 breaths, about 25, give and take, depending on how many breaths, the volume of your breath. And then also there's this pillow, a pillow also by Klymit, and the weight is a little less than 2 ounces, but it measures 15 inches by 11 inches. And that's the 4th luxury item that I'll be using. Again, to make sure I can get some decent sleep in case this, in case things don't work out quite as I expected them to be with this Mylar sleeping bag, or despite using it, because I'm going to be probably using the Mylar sleeping bag on top of the mattress. But that is the primary objective, is to test the effectiveness of the Mylar sleeping bag in 15-degree weather and see how it works, and just get a good feel for it and see how effective it's going to be for a 72-hour evacuation kit. So, wish me luck. So this video, this is part 2 of the results video for how the Mylar sleeping bag turned out, with regard to my trying it during sleeping overnight, when it was it began at about 15 degrees and dropped to about 9 degrees outside. I did have this luxury item, which is the tent. So while inside the tent, it kept it approximately 7 degrees warmer, 7 to 8 degrees warmer, and that helped a lot. But yeah, so during the coldest it got outside was 9 degrees, and inside the tent, it was about, 7 or 8 degrees warmer than that, so about 17 degrees. And this is the Mylar sleeping bag. It's after being rolled out. It worked pretty good. It actually did. What I found out is that it kept me warm probably down to about 20 degrees. My feet started getting a little bit colder than the rest of my body. But really, aside from that, it worked out really great. It's definitely an item I would trust my life on in an emergency situation. So I definitely recommend it for a bug out bag 72-hour kit. So I basically tried the Mylar sleeping bag for a little bit before switching over to this Klymit synthetic 0-degree sleeping bag, which I decided to try as well. So after the Mylar sleeping bag, after I determined how low would be reasonable to go with that, and after I started experiencing that my feet were getting a little bit cold, and that I decided to switch to the Klymit, only because I could tell how I had pretty much reached the limit with the Mylar sleeping bag. So at that point, I determined, it's not going to do any good to torture myself and continue sleeping in it if I'm going to just have cold feet. A little bit more about the Mylar sleeping bag, though. So I had read a little bit about that when you're sleeping in it, that condensation builds up inside. I did experience a little bit of condensation, really not a whole lot. And it really it really did not affect my ability to sleep in it. I found the greatest challenge during this whole experience was basically just the fact of breathing in cold air, which is just, just normal because you have to continue to breathe. But the cold air, of course, just had its effect. Since it was about 18 degrees inside the sleeping bag, or inside the tent here, the air being about 18 degrees. So it did have that was a downside, but that was not any type of result due to the sleeping bag. That was just a natural part of choosing to sleep outside in below freezing weather. So I still recommend the Mylar sleeping bag. Things to expect from it when you're using it is, if you're using one Mylar sleeping bag, I would say probably don't expect to have it keep you warm for sure below 20 degrees. At least based on this one by Leapfrog, Tact Bivvy by Survival Frog, not Leapfrog, Survival Frog. And yeah, so if you're going to, and you might want to probably prepare accordingly for it to probably keep you warm above 30 degrees, because I would say that below 30 degrees or below freezing, that you might want to just have 2 of them as opposed to just 1. So that's what I would say is probably, if you're going to be using one Tact Bivvy Mylar sleeping bag, that you would probably want to just plan on using it for above freezing, going no lower than freezing basically, and then using 2 below freezing. And that's what I would recommend. So as far as the synthetic sleeping bag, the reason behind the synthetic sleeping bag, the 0 degree, this 0 degree synthetic sleeping bag by Klymit turned out wonderful as well. It definitely kept me warm. So after I switched over to it for a little bit to try it, I found that it definitely kept me warm. It goes down to 0 degrees according to its rating limit, and as it shows on this cover here. But yeah, it definitely worked out great for that as well. It's designed here in Utah, and the company does a lot of nice products for their more along the lines of camping. So obviously a synthetic sleeping bag is not really, well, a sleeping bag beyond the Mylar, it's not really technically an emergency item, but it still could be used. It still could be used as one. You just don't want to be carrying it along with a 72-hour kit bug out bag because of the weight. And that's the reason why the Mylar sleeping bag is, why Mylar sleeping bags are used in the bug out bag 72-hour kits, is because of they only weigh just a few ounces. But when it comes down to it, it just depends on what you're able to carry and what you're willing to carry. The reality of the matter is that, based on sources that I've reviewed, is that you have to really simplify things and get things down to a very low weight, and the only way to do that is by going with a Mylar sleeping bag as opposed to this 7.4 pound synthetic sleeping bag. Another word about synthetic sleeping bags versus there's an alternative to that called a down sleeping bag, and down sleeping bags weigh a little bit less. They have pretty much the same degree rating limit, and Klymit makes them. Klymit makes a 0 degree down sleeping bag that weighs about almost half as this synthetic one. I chose to go with the synthetic one because synthetic can get wet but still retain its heating properties, whereas with down sleeping bags, if they get wet, then they lose their heating properties. And I didn't want to have to deal with any type of situation where if the sleeping bag got wet that it lost its heating properties. If you watched a TV series Alone, which was broadcast on the History Channel, there's at least one example in that TV series with regard to, you know, using a down sleeping bag versus using synthetic sleeping bags. For that exact reason, is that one of the participants used a down sleeping bag, it got wet, and no longer kept him warm, so he eventually left the show. But anyways, so just a little word on that. And that's why, really, for an emergency kit, bug out bags 72-hour kit, that you would use the Mylar sleeping bag. Again, with regard to the other luxury items that I used for the Klymit sleeping pad, blow-up mattress, and the pillow, also by Klymit, those were luxury items. Those are not really the things that you would take along with you in a 72-hour kit. However, you know, who is to say that maybe you can still put it in? There's nothing really saying that you can't have something in your 72-hour kit. A lot of it just depends on what you feel comfortable with, and really, if you can keep the weight down, that's really what it comes down to. So, but I hope that, I mean, this experience has definitely taught me a lot, and it's helped me to better understand the quality, the thermal qualities behind the Mylar sleeping bag.